And now we are live. And welcome to Thoughts on Talks with Reverend Mike McMorrow, myself, Milena Dawn, and Salaam Thompson, who joins us and educates us about lots of things. He's a very well-versed individual. So thank you for joining us again, Salaam.
Thank you for having me, Milena and Rev.
Of
Yeah, thank
course.
you for being here.
So,
I'm ready to go to Chicago now after our Thoughts on Talks. Sounds like a great city.
It is. I can treat you to some Giordano's, and since I don't eat meat anymore, but I'd love to watch you eat Harold's chicken. So that was a staple when we were coming up. So
I was enjoying I think it was a flashback Thursday or something with you and Isaiah had your Cubs jerseys on.
sure, yes, it was a National Sons Day. Yes.
One day, after the pandemic is over and we can all travel in groups together, maybe Salaam will lead us on a field trip. We can all take Salaam's tour of Chicago.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'll make sure my buddies know that we're coming, so it'll be safe passage.
Thank you. That's good. Sunday, Reverend Mike gave a talk, and the title was "It's All in Your Hands." Is that what it was?
Yes.
And so I think
the answer's in your hands.
The answer's in your hands. Well, and that is true. And so we were talking about the debates that were on last night. We were talking about really just the conversation that we've been having. How do we take it back into our hands when we see that the people that are kind of, that we've elected or have been chosen to lead this country seem to be doing such a terrible job of it? And so we need to take our power back and find the answers and then do the steps to make the changes and live in the world that we envision. And we haven't met since Breonna Taylor's the police that shot her and her boyfriend were they indicted, or one was indicted? And
they were indicted on one-time endangerment, because bullets went into other apartments.
Right. So it had nothing to do with shooting her.
Nothing to do whatsoever with her shooting, with her being shot, I should say.
Yeah. So I was watching Trevor Noah on YouTube, where he does the Daily Show, but it's the daily social distancing show. And his take on it was really, I think, made it very clear for people who don't understand the ramifications of that sort of legal decision, which is if justice doesn't look like justice, then how do we get justice? Like, there's nowhere to turn. And the message of that is that it tells all of us, but especially any Black person, that really they're not safe in their homes. That anybody who is a policeman or has some sort of recognized authority can bust into a home at any time and shoot everybody up, and all their actions are legal. So this is where it's like, okay, we really have to change the whole structure that we're in. And the answer is in our hands. And we need to start acting, all of us as a society need to start acting as if that's the truth. That's the case, because it is.
Well, and, it's also a call to citizenship of the highest order.
Yes.
And particularly because I think we as a nation have been on cruise control for so long that we've been, because we have built these institutions and these structures that were put together in the 60s and 70s. And now, so this judicial infrastructure, which really has been shaped to protect law enforcement, and law enforcement should have protection so that they can do their job, and they should have some measure of liability coverage, but that does not take away from the fact that they need to do their job properly.
Correct.
And that the system itself, which makes it possible, for instance, to have a no-knock warrant, right? So I don't know all the ins and outs of law enforcement. I don't know what kind of warrant they were going there to serve. If it was yet another drug warrant, then that becomes a much broader systemic societal issue. I mean, we have really important stuff that needs to be done right now. And it's important that we have these demonstrations and that people are heard. I think Breonna, although her family seems to be they at least have a settlement that can help their family with generational money that can shift the trajectory of their family for a couple of generations at least moving forward. It still doesn't take away the fact that this young woman, by all accounts, was a just a real contributor to making society a better place, right?
Yeah.
And it's the whole thing. I mean, the DA is right to say that it's a tragedy, and it absolutely is a tragedy. But it's a tragedy that is happening on a daily basis, and it's going to take the citizenry stepping up and just going to these boring ass meetings as people, comb over the minutia of how to write policy, how to write effective legislation, how to write regulations as to, I was just talking to a minister friend of mine. So in the city where she lives, because she's serving with on a police support thing of some kind. And so all their police have body cameras. So that's the number one thing that everybody needs to insist on, that there's body cameras. But then they have this policy when they can have them on and turn them off.
Yeah.
And then things can happen. Life happens in the middle of all that. And then they realize in the middle of an altercation, oh, we got to put our body cams back on.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think law enforcement is also realizing now that it's not about catching them doing something wrong as much as catching them. They can be used to catch them doing stuff right also.
Right. Well,
if they're inclined to be that,
Exactly. And to find the guys who are not inclined, and the gals, but probably mostly men, probably mostly white men, frankly, and just get them out, and do them a favor and get them out. Yeah, it's a good job. Yeah, you get a good paycheck. But, why do you want to have a job that underscores and validates this seething resentment and hatred that you have inside of you, rather than going someplace where you can actually heal it and do some real good. Right?
That's the sort of underlying message of energy. Any tool, anything in humanity can be used for positive or negative. And so the body cameras are the same thing as our votes, as our citizenship, the energy we put into it, as the choices we make every day on a million little things. We can make a choice to improve our lives and the lives of those around us, or we can make a choice that, hurts people or is selfish and ends up hurting people. And so the body cams can be used to prove something positive or negative, but we all have to stop trying to hide uh everything. Everything needs to be seen, and that's what you said so often, Reverend Mike, is everything is being revealed to be healed,
And
and
see,
that's why
that's
everything's
where just I'm sorry, Malena.
no, go ahead.
To that point of what everything needs to be hidden, there was subsequent evidence that brought forth anonymously by one of the grand jurors that um, Attorney General Daniel Cameron wasn't trying to seek an indictment at all against the officers.
Mm,
His job basically was to be on the side of the establishment, at all costs.
mm,
One another thing to remember is the warrant that they had was for someone that A was already in custody, and B, because he was in custody, he wasn't present at the home. It was the ex-boyfriend of Breonna Taylor. And so, like, we saw on the news how um, Shaq and Charles Barkley were eviscerated, but I understand Shaq's perspective. Barkley not so much, but Shaq's perspective is this is a guy who's comes from a military background, who is a law enforcement and is moonlights as one at least, and gone through the training to do that. So he's saying that, well, if they had a warrant, then they're there to do a job, but the warrant didn't even have the correct person on there. You see what I mean? So if you and he's already in custody, and another thing is also this is a society that celebrates a lot of first. So like the first black man to do this, that, and the other, first black man, black mayor, the first woman Supreme Court justice. We celebrate a lot of first, and we get hung up in that symbolism that we fail to recognize the body of work or the how can I say do we emote with that person? Does that person have what kind of a DNA morally do they have, to carry
right.
out the job? Daniel Cameron, I mean, has been, smoozing and in bed with the Mitch McConnells who have spoken ill of, irrefutably, I might add, in those circles. He moves about in those circles or with the current president right now.
Mm,
And I watched the press conference that he gave when he decided not to pursue any and place any indictment on any of the four officers. And
mm,
I literally wanted to throw up, by watching them. And we get hung up to my point about symbolism is we think that, okay, there's a black attorney general, okay, surely justice is going to happen. And we have a saying in our community that skin folk ain't kinfolk,
mm,
because being black is not just skin. Being black is state of mind. Being black is consciousness.
mm,
Being black is being communal. So all of those things, you have I can say, a cumulative, evaluation out of that as to where you stand. And
right.
it's not to say, because you hear all the time, I hear this all the time, at least when folks are going back at me saying, well, why can't we come to an agreement that everybody doesn't have to have the same opinion? I agree, everybody doesn't have to have the same opinion, but there's a difference between people having different opinions and people holding opinions that are directly and diametrically opposed to my rights as a citizen and to my rights as a human being. At
Mm-hmm.
that point, we can't be, as far as seeing eye to eye. That's not going to happen. I mean, now I could see if you had a different method to achieve the same goal. Yeah, we can welcome that. But if you're saying, okay, I have a different viewpoint that's going to achieve a goal that's antithetical to your very existence, yes, I'm going to have a problem with you.
Right.
And I think I speak for many black people, and generally who will have a problem with you. Is that when Daniel Cameron, we sat up there, at the podium, and then he had the audacity to use Bible verses in an attempt to pacify black people. And this is the same playbook that is used to us. They're quick to say, "Oh, don't forget your lesson, boy. Learn to be peaceful to us, boy. Learn to be apologetic to us." We saw that in the Amber Geiger case in Dallas, where that black judge got offered her the stand after the sentencing was done, and she hugs the perpetrator whom she rendered judgment against. I mean, you and black people by and large were outraged because what we saw there was pretty much a case of mammyism. I'll be frank with you, about that. I mean, where see, the thing is about systemic racism, and it's not just systemic. Well, it's racism because racism is systematic. So there's no point in putting systemic racism. Racism is a system, but to put white supremacy, in a nutshell, is white supremacy is so complex, it's so layered that, and so how can I say, in a negative way, brilliant, that white people don't even have to be at the helm for the machinations of it to work. They can use the machinations, can have it can operate on its own, or it can operate by taking the mindset of a Daniel Cameron and of that, I forgot that judge's name, the black female judge who presided over Amber Geiger's case in Dallas. They can take the mindset of them and do the work of white supremacy. And so when you have these stooges, I'll call them that, working, for the system, and well, at the same time, the masses of us are enamored of the fact, oh, sister girl got a powerful position. Sister girl is about to do some work. Oh, go ahead, brother. You go, boy, do this, that, and the other. I mean, so we're enamored with skin, but we didn't assess that mind. We didn't assess that heart. We didn't assess their work. And so when you start doing the deep dive in that, now you start to see, okay, now I know whose side you're working on. But people like me who see that, like, I can tell you how many times that, like, I've been told, oh, let the brother go to work. Oh, look, get sister girl a break. You and black women, y'all, no, it ain't got nothing to do with that. I mean, I'm evaluating you because, and maybe it might seem harsh, but I know what to expect from a Donald Trump. I know he's not my friend. Okay, I know that unequivocally. So there's nothing that he can really offend me with. Yeah, he pissed me off, but I'm not surprised. But if you're posturing to be my friend, I'm going to hold you to a higher degree of scrutiny because I expect the modicum, I expect the actions and the kinetic action, I should say, to follow through on your posturing to be my friend. By you posing as a friend and then doing the work of our arch enemy, that's a level of espionage.
And that
that's
makes me think
dangerous.
of how politics, like everything you said, is like the overview, the description of politics. Ultimately, ideally, the two parties are working toward the same goal of a democracy that works for everybody in the country, in theory, and have different methods to get there
And
using
on
your
paper,
words. Yes, ideally. But what happens is when people, especially people who are from a minority group, sometimes they have to start playing that political game to get to those levels of perceived power. They may not actually be given the power or have the power. But then you go, oh, look, it's a woman in this. I mean, from my perspective, I'm looking at the women's movement.
Yeah.
And sometimes you see a woman who gets a place of power, but they have to act like the men who let them have that power in order to keep that position.
So in other words, you
So,
weren't given power, you were given a permit. A
right.
permit to what?
So in some ways it has that sense of positive forward momentum that, okay, a woman has this place, a Black person has this place of power, a minority of any type, Latina, Latin X, LGBTQ, any of those, you're like, yay, they're finally being recognized. And then so I think the general sense is like, okay, we can relax, that's fixed. But it's only the first, like you said, and it's symbolic, but not necessarily truly representative of equality.
Yeah, because we look at Black excellence and unfortunately Black excellence in those positions of power are looked at through the same lens of rite of passage, or a right to go, or things are better now. And but honestly, we went through that, with Obama, and his wife. It doesn't mean that we're not proud of them individually as Black people for ascending to where they've ascended. But I sat and watched Obama promise the late Dorothy Height, that he would make a Black selection for the Supreme Court when he had the opportunity to do it. And I forgot the woman's name, but she's a Jewish background. It'll come to me. But that was his selection instead. What Dorothy Height asked. So it's like when people are supporting their guy or their gal, there's a level of expectation and a ROI, if you will, that the people are expecting to come back. So it seems that every time Black people ask for that ROI of the people whom we back and who we put in power, we're told, well, he can't be the president just of Black America. He got to be the president of all the United States. And we're told that not only by the powers whom we're asking that, we're told by those of us who are selected, tokenized, if you even more so, that in these positions, to where they're used, or what I call them as they're the Negro whisperers. They're the ones who turn around and say, "Here now, we gave you this nice buttered biscuit. Now we want you to keep the masses quiet and don't tell them about the game that we got playing behind this curtain right here. I need you as the front man to do this." And you want to know an example of that? When Roger Goodell and Jay-Z appeared last year, and then Jay-Z supposedly had this big grand scheme of what he was going to do for the NFL to help Colin Kaepernick get a job. Jay-Z did all the talking. Robert Goodell sat there and didn't say shit. And this is how they move. You see what I'm saying? They say, "Oh, I got Jay-Z right here. He married to Beyonce." And the Black girls, they got Beehive jumping off. They recite Jay-Z lyrics here and there and the other. So I got the Pied Piper of hip hop right in front of me. I ain't got to say a damn thing. I'm gonna sit here and marinate. Let him take my bullets for me. So this is where we are. Excuse me.
Yeah, that is where
I
we
got
are.
excited.
Right?
I got excited with that.
Like this. And actually that kind of speaks to the whole thing with the presidential debate last night, that ideally they would have had an intelligent conversation about their plans. And oops, we lost Salaam. He'll be back. About really anything. Intelligent people are, we would like to see intelligent people having intelligent conversation leading our country. And that's not really what we got. And it's not where we are. And I think the American people are so used to being entertained that they don't realize. Here comes Salaam. There we go.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. So the American people are so addicted, actually, to entertainment that they'll watch a presidential debate like this and talk about it like it was, you know, the WWF, like it was a wrestling match, and not realize the impact it's having on our lives, that we're not having, like, you know, Reverend Mike, you said, go to the boring meetings, listen to the boring policy decisions. That's really what a presidential debate should be about, policy. What are we doing for the country? And yet it's all become symbolism and popularity, and you know, these staged performances, and people buy it. And so it's like, how do we shift people to see the important things, to look with discerning eyes, to be conscientious about their choices, to educate themselves, and to just care. I mean, to really care. And that's part of the problem, is we're like you said at one point, we have our own people that we're trying to convince, like, let's all work together and make everything better for all of us in our communities, in our families. And not everybody's pulling the rope the same direction. We're not all working together. So that's like, it feels like the Wild West. It feels like we have chaos, and we need to figure out, like, you know, I was even thinking maybe we have like a shadow government and we like secretly do really good stuff on the side. And then when the mouthpiece talks up here, we have our little secret do-gooders over here. And we do what we want and bring about change. And that's probably already happening in so many ways. And I don't think I'd like to operate like that.
That's another conversation, but you're actually correct on that.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing new under the sun, right? So I was looking up, like, how do we make changes? I know that election workers are needed, poll workers are needed, to make sure that everybody in every community has access and can vote on election day and before, because there's all these roadblocks being put up with the mail-in vote and all that.
This voting thing, I do not understand. After you have stood in line and voted and had the experience of doing that, why you would not want to do a mail ballot after that. You can study the issues. You really can make an informed choice, because you're not exhausted after standing in line for an hour or whatever, and then feeling like you're holding up the line while you're looking through the ballot. Because, you know, particularly in our state in California, with the proposition system, there are really important things that need to be analyzed. So because you have groups. So the proposition thing is a wonderful democratic tool that the state of California developed. But anyone can use them. So you can have people who are clever in the way they write the languaging in the proposition, to where people, oh, that's something I agree with, and you vote yes, but then you actually find out you're voting against the thing that you think you're voting for because of the way, right?
It's worded.
Right. So, but that means that you have to do your homework.
Right.
And I don't know if voters are that informed when they actually get into the booth, but it seems to me that voting at home would make you a much smarter voter.
What did I say about the American electorate earlier?
Yeah.
Well, you know, I don't want to know that.
And I don't,
you know, I want to know that people are kind of, I mean, because really we can't blame the politicians when 45% of people who are eligible to vote are the only ones making the decisions, where old white people are the ones who are making the majority of the decisions because they're the ones who show up because they're retired or for whatever the thing is, right? So, I mean, there are a lot of things, and I understand why people in power would want to suppress things, but because the other part of this is, why not move election day to July 4th? And
that's a thought.
Make it a celebration.
Make it a national holiday. And then when we have those stupid fireworks shows, we actually have something to celebrate. Everybody voted. Everybody remembered why have this whole thing going on.
You can have hot dogs and hamburgers and corn on the cob on the way to the polls. It's a
something, or veterans.
Mike McMorrow for president. Mike McMorrow for president.
Well, I'm not born in America, so.
Okay.
Well, then they got to prove that, right?
Take my advice. I won't be using it. But it seems like there are things.
Yeah. Well, and I don't think the big problem with vote by mail, the problem that's being presented, which is not a real problem, is Trump would like us to think that there's rampant fraud in the U.S. Postal Service, and that other people, even before it gets to the Postal Service or after, can really mess with ballots in ways that nobody has ever messed with ballots before. But there, come on. It's not a valid argument. And there are several different ways that we can vote. And you can even if you vote at home, you can take your finished ballot, if it's a mail-in ballot, even if it's not, I think you can, the mail-in ballot, you can seal it and drop it at a polling place. You don't have to stand in line to do that. Right. You just drop it in the box. So it goes in with all the rest of the ballots. I've done that because when I lived overseas, I had a mail-in ballot. And sometimes I was here on election day and ended up doing that, taking my mail-in and just dropping it off. There are also places set up around the city, like at the library is my local place, the North Hills Library, where they generally, under non-pandemic conditions, have a box set up there for mail-in ballots to be dropped off. Yeah. So you don't have to actually put a stamp on it and drop it in the mail. But if you are planning to do that, doing it earlier than later is probably better.
It's the best bet,
delays. But the whole idea of not trusting the U.S. Postal Service, I read an interesting article. It was in the Washington Post. That, no, actually, I think I might have heard it on MSNBC. Trump is he wants to mess up the Postal Service because he wants to ruin Jeff Bezos and Amazon's growth. And it's like a personal rivalry. And so they presented all of these things. And I thought, that I wouldn't be surprised if that's part of it. But who knows? I mean, that's just another.
I mean, nobody's not going to catch Bezos from a wealth standpoint. I mean, he's in a rocket ship that's just gone.
And I think he may own the Washington Post now that I
think so. That wouldn't shock me either. So
that's why but still, it is a time when we ought to question everything, that we ought to look into things a little more deeply, whether it's vote by mail or, the wording of ballots. And that's where I go to trusted sources of I'll pick a few different places, like the League of Women Voters or the San Fernando Valley Democrats or, even LA Weekly or a progressive thing. And I'll take kind of a poll of what did they say about it, what feels right to me, and then I'll make my selection. So, I mean, I do all that research before, even if I'm going to go stand in line, before I go to and I fill out my ballot like a good student and then
Of
stand
course.
in line
A
there.
standardized test, right?
Yeah, fill in the bubble all the
Mm-hmm.
way. But that's really, it's not much to ask. There are countries in the world where people face violence just by showing up at the polls, that they're, in danger to do that, to vote.
And we don't know
Um,
that that's not going to happen this year.
We
well,
don't know it,
Right?
and
With
I
the
mean,
stand down and stand by.
oh my gosh.
right. I mean, that was a call to arms to his base, basically.
Oh my
So,
gosh, that
And I
is
um,
mean, that was just like out of his mouth before he could even stop himself.
hmm but he was given basically a slam dunk to like denounce white supremacy. He was like multiple times, and he just couldn't bring himself to do it. And mainly is he didn't want to upset his base. He knows how he got there. And it's like almost like this reminds me of an overt way of how the Southern strategy was reintroduced in '81 by Lee Atwater. And it's like, but Lee Atwater, they use like covert euphemisms to bring that about. Here is like straight in your face. This is like what we are.
I just feel like we need to shape things to where it's unpatriotic
Hmm.
to be a racist. It's unpatriotic to try and cut anyone out of the herd who's an American. That it's unpatriotic to solicit help from an outside power for an election. And it's
Right.
patriotic to even domestically, right? It's, to get back to um, the persuasion of ideas. But I don't know how, I just don't know how to hammer it home that we are stronger together than we are divided.
Hmm.
Right? And then to understand so that even if let's just say for the sake of argument that we get to a place where, okay, so let's just agree that Black Americans deserve reparations of some kind, and we come up with some formula,
Hmm.
right? But then after that, there's also got to be a recognition that just you have access to the system, right? But you're still going to have to work your ass off to get anything,
Of course. Yeah.
right? So it's just, and I think maybe that's what the pushback is from white folk, because they have had to work hard. What they're not connecting with is that it's not a level playing field, and there's a willful ignorance in not accepting that fact, because there's all kinds of good science out there now that proves that we have a problem within the system that is marginalizing people from having equal access. And in the beginning, it was pretty blatant. And we talked about this before as far as the Banking Act. What was that, in 65 or whenever that was?
Hmm.
But, it still went on in insurance, right? They were redlining in insurance until the 90s.
Yeah, they wouldn't underwrite loans, for homes in the black
Right.
community.
So,
Yeah, no, I mean, like the Wall Street Journal, I think it was the Wall Street Journal, where one of the economists that released their findings that said that it takes approximately 228 years for a black family to catch up to close the wealth gap with a white family, and that's just the average black family, average white family. And that tells you how like tilted the balance is. I was asked before, um, what is keeping um, what is keeping black people down, and the interesting thing is like we look at when they asked the question more, they said, well, what's stopping you from being what you want to be? I said, well, frankly, I mean, if you look behind me, nothing's stopping me from reading a book, researching. Nothing is stopping me from having a vision. Nothing is stopping me from, setting goals. See, but those are individual coaching, mentoring behaviors,
Correct.
but what individual behavior or mentorship can a person, particularly a Black person, go through that's going to close a gap that was there by design. You
Right.
know what I'm saying? And that's where the difference, lies,
Right.
but between the two.
I've even read an
And that's a
article.
heavy lift,
Yeah.
Hmm.
I've
right? That's
even
a heavy lift but one that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
I
And
read an article about immigrants from other countries who
Hmm.
are Black people, but or maybe dark skinned people,
Yes.
but they come to America from outside, and
Hmm.
that they seem to do better than Black Americans who are already here and have been here for generations.
Hmm.
And so the immigrant perspective was, well, we came here with nothing and we built ourselves up. But again, there has been so much mental and emotional and just systemic, the blockades for Black Americans, that even if they did the same things, they wouldn't get to that same level
Hmm.
because they'd be
well,
stopped.
and there's a consciousness within the immigrant that has not been bathed in all of the things that you can't do.
Right.
Right.
It
Like
hasn't been
whether we
oppressed in the same way.
And
right,
immigrants wasn't subjected to the seasoning that Black people
that's
were subjected to in order to become Americanized. Like the immigrant wasn't bound to a post and
Right.
made to pronounce the slave master's name instead of his own. That immigrant is
Right.
coming over with the not only the baggage but the whole legacy
Yeah, they have
intact from
their
their
root.
homeland, their
Yeah, and
whole roots.
they
You,
don't
you know
have
what I
that
mean?
erased from them and taken from
Absolutely.
them. Their identities.
Yeah. So you have a
even
direct chain, and
right,
frankly, even while having that direct chain, they also had a homeland from which they fled from. You see,
Mm,
let's talk about that. You
right.
know what I mean? Like Black people, we can't go nowhere. You know what I
right.
mean? Because there's even Black Africans. There are some like I don't know the countries. I won't name the countries, but there are some, and there's a level of consciousness out there that pits Black Africans against Black Americans that think that we're lazy, that we're spoiled, we're not authentically Black in some capacity or another.
Mm,
But that's this is the global outreach of white supremacy
right.
at work. But
Yeah.
like I mentioned, like when you come over, you have your last name intact. You know who your great grandparents were. You're bringing customs. You're
Yeah.
bringing a culture. And here we at the we are far removed from the principles of Ma'at in ancient Kemet. We're not from that. We're so far removed from it. Now we're housed and have to piecemeal, our individual family customs together, which is why it's hard for Black people in generally to get on the same page with everyone.
Mm.
Well,
That's,
I agree with that, but tell me how this sits with you guys,
hmm.
and tell me if this sounds kind of harsh. But I don't care what race you are in this country. Americans are soft.
Yes.
I mean, compared to immigrants who come here from other places, who are grateful that they have that water comes out of a tap and it's safe enough to drink, right?
Not if you live in Flint, though.
That's
Well,
true.
right. I mean, we can all find, I'm sure if you go up to Lancaster, there's arsenic in the water, but you know what I'm saying,
Yes.
right?
That we're kind of
Generally,
You don't
yeah.
have,
spoiled.
you're not walking 2 miles to the water hole or to
Right.
wherever. So
but generally, but there are places like there are places in the like let's say number one, the Mississippi Delta, where like there are black people who are living there in squalor. They don't have any kind of a septic system in place. They have like they're walking barefoot on straw floors or whatever. They, I mean, very third world conditions that you wouldn't think that as an average American that exists in our country today in 2020. And it's still that way today down in the Mississippi Delta. Those are in the most poor and destitute conditions of any black people that's in this country. I mean, of course, the inner city has its own dynamics if you go through every hood there, but and even that's by design, even. I mean, like I can equate that to what is like in, I see a lot of parallel in the Gaza Strip, with the Palestinians basically being occupied by occupied force, by Israelis that get kept in check, or they're in prison, or they're murdered, that kind of thing. And the same exists, in the inner cities in Chicago with the presence, of a police force.
I think I understand what you're saying, Reverend Mike, about Americans being soft. And I think that's part of how we have let go of our control or our participation in government and communities and all of that, because we have been lulled by the comforts of commercial society
Mm-hmm.
and the, what do they call it? The opiate of the people, which is television
religion
and entertainment. That it lulls us into this false sense of security, or that if you have all these shiny baubles and you have, the internet and you have TV, you're comfortable, you've got a lazy boy, you've got, a microwave oven. You can live a comfortable life without very much effort and get a loan and buy a truck and, rent a place to live. For most of the middle classes of America, that has been a possibility. And so then you don't have to go to school and get a PhD. Where like in India, taxi drivers might have 2 PhDs because they have to educate themselves so much to get just any job, and
Yes.
that they end up going overseas. Most Americans don't have to finish high school to get a job that might pay them enough or give them, the chance to get a car loan. Of course, it creates a different kind of financial
Situation. Yeah.
Right.
almost.
Yeah.
I don't even know if that's as true as it once was, because
Right.
we don't have those kind of manufacturing jobs anymore.
Right.
But it's certainly true for things like for many jobs in construction, for instance. But anyway, I just there's exceptions to everything. But I just, because I think of this idea of being soft, then, right? That's a consciousness issue, and I guess that's kind of what I'm moving to, is that in order for us to move from outrage to progress, we have to have a shift in consciousness that where we all recognize that. So we're all recognizing that there are problems and they need to be addressed, and that it's not enough to just define the problem, right? Or it's not even back before that. It's not just enough to be, it's not enough to be outraged about Breonna Taylor or Trayvon or George Floyd or Michael Brown. I mean, the list is endless, right?
Yeah.
Right. So, and I do think it's important. I don't know if it's possible, but certainly at a national level, we can at least cast, the leadership can at least cast a vision that says, these are the expectations that we have for all of our police forces. These are the expectations we have for hiring practices, right? Before you write legislation or anything else, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can at least get it out there, right? This is the way we think, fair compensation looks, right? This is the way. This is the way carbon emissions, So, for instance, one of the things we haven't talked about, which is, we can kind of, it's a sidebar, I suppose,
Sure.
is because they are kind of tied, and that is the governor Newsom coming out with these setting this target of was it 2045 for new cars,
For the electric cars. Yeah.
Right now. And he's taking some heat about that, and it's this and it's that, or even the Green New Deal, right? Oh, it's too draconian, it's too this, it's too that, but it's a target,
right? And it's 25 years away.
Yeah,
and all of these things, it's just the thing that's, I don't know about you guys, but it does kind of feel overwhelming because there's now so much to do. And if there's any good that's come out of these last 4 years, it is kind of putting a cap on that it's ours to do, and that we're running out of time, and that it's, even though it feels overwhelming, it is doable, and it's going to take a gigantic shift in consciousness. So I don't know that Trump wasn't wrong to say, make America great again. But we need to focus on the things that make it great.
Yeah.
Well, in a general sense,
instead of tearing down, right? Tearing down the stuff that was already in place. I don't know if I'm not making any sense or not, but because we need to do the race thing, and it doesn't do any good to create a level and a loving playing field if there's no jobs for people to go to,
or no planet to live on.
Right. I mean, I had this thought: if we keep going the way we are now, the whole country is going to look like Lancaster. Right?
Yeah.
Arid, I can see that.
Right? Arid. Nothing will grow there. And I'm not saying that Lancaster's not a fine place, but it's a fine place because it's a relatively small place. It's it's a small corner of a less arid Mojave Desert.
Yeah.
And
the rest of the countries are so not welcoming to having Americans come there now with the pandemic, because we have the highest rate of infection, that if America gets itself into one of those situations where we need help from somebody else, it's not going to be there, because it's that trust and that interaction has been eroded a lot.
Well,
over time, and people have a long memory, and people remember how it was. I mean, but that just speaks to what happened, to America. I mean, regardless of political persuasion, in this case, of what I'm about to say, but you have a situation where you have this existential threat that's in the White House right now, and then you hear the term lesser of two evils being thrown around. Okay. So just think with me for a minute that, okay, you're saying that, not saying the absence of evil, you're saying the lesser of two evils that you have to do. And generally, let's say in general, that Americans in general are good people. Okay, not on both sides, but I digress. But we're good people. But okay, so I'm a good person. I'm going to pick a lesser evil to overcome this existential threat of a greater evil. What did I just compromise? You just pretty much compromise your very own soul, your very own consciousness that you're trying to raise in the event to knock out an existential threat. So it's almost like you have to become the monster that you're trying to get rid of in order to kind of right the ship in a sense. And it leaves you. It's not no right or wrong there, but it just leads you to think, okay, America, what the hell happened to you, dude? What the hell? Look at yourself in the mirror and ask, like, this is the choice that you have to make. That pick this lesser than evil as a good person to knock off a greater evil, or like you have to demand nothing in order to ask for something. The kind of thing. We're in
It
a hell
is
of
a
a
little
dilemma.
bit like the yin yang symbol that has a little bit of darkness in the light and a little bit of light in the darkness. That there does need to be a balance, and sometimes that is it comes out in our world, our manifest world, as a compromise. And that's kind of what we were talking about with, if a Black person or a woman gets into a place of power, that they have to make that compromise. They have to become the enemy. They have to become like the powerful to be playing the game. So I like that you're pointing out, because it's not the first time today even that I've had the conversation that the lesser of two evils is still an evil.
It's still an evil. I mean, otherwise, like people are on this identity stripping pole, and you're stripping off these garments of your very identity, just to get a dollar, just to get more patrons to give you that dollar. You know what I'm saying? And so
when you were asking, how do we get off?
Right.
How do we get off that pole?
Well, and specifically that.
Right?
Healing ourselves and our souls.
Well, and I think I think that there has been a worship almost of wealth. We've become, we don't make things anymore, right? And when it breaks, we don't repair it. We just go buy
get another one.
But isn't the worship of wealth also how this country was founded? I mean, isn't that why they brought the slaves over in the first place? Is because they wanted to become wealthy without doing the work themselves.
Well, and I'm not saying that there's nothing evil about wealth. I'm not saying there's anything, capitalism itself is a great equalizer. I mean, a great innovator. Right? I mean, I started my construction company with $75, right? Construction is one of those weird things that you can, you don't have to have a place, and you need equipment and so forth. But what I'm saying is that it's innovative that way.
And it's just another energy that can be used for good or ill.
Correct. And the social contract from which that happens, that is what government is. Right? That government and culture, right? So government really is kind of the baseline of what culture is. Right? And I think to your point, Salaam, is we need to kind of redefine that, and this word liberal then becomes a nasty word, but it has its basis in liberty.
Yeah, it does.
Right? So I think if we can just find our way back, to science, to facts, the generation of wealth is fine, but not for wealth's sake.
Right.
So what are we going? What are we building with? What kind of country do we want to fund? Because really, in a lot of ways, we've been defunding. The United States has been underfunded for 50 years.
It has.
And we've been cruising on the infrastructure that the greatest generation, right? All the guys who came back from World War II, who saw what real fascism looks like, and they came back and built this world, including, and it was the military who pointed the way as far as integrating the military and so forth. Still, there was so much that didn't get addressed. And the Jim Crow South certainly was the next maybe low-level enslavement of, dark-skinned people.
And peonage and so forth.
But you could also make a case that credit cards and credit have been that's the indentured servitude of the modern era. So that
that's why they're on college campuses, getting them when they're 18.
Well, but what I'm getting at, and and the book I wrote kind of speaks to this, is that we're so busy hoeing the row that we have that we never look up to see where we're at.
True.
And that, that row just never seems to end. And then you get to the end of it and you got to turn around and go back to the other end of the field. So again, right, there needs to be this gigantic shift in consciousness, regardless of where we are on the.
And what I'm hearing from each of you, and I think we should start tying a bow on this because we've the 1 hour mark. Morals. Salaam was talking about our moral choices and science. So using logic and, balancing all of these things so that we're not just reacting from us versus them, good versus evil. We need to see the bigger picture and find, investing in the best world for ourselves, our families, our communities, our planet. And that's really what we all want to do, at least here in this conversation. And, everybody wants to take care of their families. And but we have a choice now, since the world seems to be falling apart, to kind of piece it back together with a higher ideal, a higher soul quotient. Sure. We're not just making America great again, but we're having it have some heart,
right?
And maybe more heart than it ever has had before.
I mean, America has an aortic rupture right now.
That's very scientific.
Yeah. Well, if we can make the world better for Isaiah and Jasmine, and maybe there's not enough time to make it better for them in the long run, but certainly for their children, right? So that they don't have to go through the BS that their father did and what, their grandparents did. And, that's a noble aspiration, right?
Yeah.
So anyway.
Absolutely.
So that's how we're sending everybody out. That's the homework anybody who's watching is to really, vote from your values and take action to make the world great, make ourselves match our vision.
Well, and to learn more and to find those things that you can in fact do.
Yeah.
Right.
Because the answer is in your hands.
Yes.
And Reverend Mike said on Sunday, so you can also go watch his talk. You can get his book, Blue Collar Spirituality, Finding a God That Works. There it is behind Salaam on his bookshelf. And
Salaam?
Oh,
of
look,
course.
They match. Very good. And of course, you can always join us at the Center for Spiritual Living in Granada Hills on Zoom or Wednesday night meditation. So there's Sunday morning, Wednesday night. You can watch them anytime because they're available on YouTube after they've been live streamed. They're archived there, along with our Thoughts on Talks episodes. So thanks everybody for joining us. And we'll
Thank
see
you.
you next time. Go be great in the world, everybody.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Okay.